Hello there, I'm HJ Cronin, author of crime, horror, and fantasy, and this is my YouTube channel, Facts of Fantasy. Now, it's been a good 4 or 5 years since I've uploaded, but here I am, back again with a small panel, and nowhere best to start than with the new series of Rings of Power. Yeah, we're going to go into episode 1 and 2, along with 3 good friends of mine from the Heathen community, all Lord of the Rings nerds, more so than myself. So you're going to get some good lore videos out of this. Anyway, we're going to dissect the first 2 episodes. When the trailers come out, there was a couple that I remember talking to Jack. I better introduce them actually. We've got Jack.
Hello.
Trevor.
Hello.
And Rich.
Good evening.
So yeah, I remember talking to Jack about the trailers, and we were both a bit apprehensive, didn't know what was coming, didn't know what to expect. And then one of the trailers, the most recent trailer came out, and it actually looked okay. And yeah, it just filled us with dread. But anyway, my initial thoughts on the first 2 episodes is I think this is absolutely stunning. Like, it really captured what Middle Earth was for me when I went to watch Lord of the Rings in the cinema, the Fellowship of the Ring. The beautiful landscapes, the mountains, the forests, everything. I think they've spent their money really well when it comes to the set pieces and everything like that. It's absolutely gorgeous. The characters wise, I don't know too much about the time period it's set, although I'm familiar with Galadriel and Elrond, obviously from the Lord of the Rings, the books. They seem to have changed a lot around, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that later. For me, seeing this sorceress, this powerful sorceress in Galadriel become a warrior, and Elrond become, like, I don't even know what Elrond's become.
Littlefinger.
Yeah, basically Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. But I do really like his character, to be honest. I like, if I can separate what I know of Tolkien and this, if we can say it's based on the Tolkien on Middle Earth, I really like the Elrond character in this story, and I quite like Galadriel in some places, but then until she threw herself into the ocean, basically, and then I thought that was stupid. But yeah, my initial thoughts are I've actually enjoyed it, and I'm interested to see what comes next. Yeah, I'm hoping it goes to the place that I want it to go, which I'll talk to at the end. And I can pass it on to one of the guys in the panel. I'll start with Jack. Jack, what are your initial thoughts on Rings of Power, episode 1 and 2?
I agree. Visually, it is stunning, but that's what $1 billion will get you. I'm very concerned about what we're seeing with the timeline, and I think it's quite telling what they can and can't use from the Silmarillion, and how they've moved a few things about. I'm enjoying the new characters and the Harfoots quite a bit. I think the Harfoots are very well done, and I'm a big fan of Arondir. Actually, he for me really feels very much like a Tolkien elf, slightly aloof but also very caring. There's a kindness to him, as well as a wisdom. Some of the canon characters, the lore characters, have been changed, and it really does feel like, especially with Galadriel and with Elrond, that they've used the branding of those names that come with Lord of the Rings, and they've just imported their own characters into them, which I actually feel, having watched it a couple of times now, I actually think they probably would have been better served if they'd have just created 2 new elf characters and had Elrond and Galadriel on the council with Gil-galad, working towards it that way. In particular with Galadriel, I'm seeing a lot of conversations and talking to a lot of people, and they're sort of saying, well, she's younger in this, but she's already 4,500 years old, man. Like, she's already been through the first age, and yeah, she has seen a lot of things. But guess what? Elrond has also seen a hell of a lot of things that
family murdered or something.
His entire family murdered, and then he was raised by the family that murdered his family. He's the son of the two that saved the entire world. So if you think Frodo saving the world with destroying the ring, multiply that by like 1 million, and that's kind of what Eärendil and Elwing did. So I do feel that they've changed a lot there. That it doesn't. I mean, we'll talk about that more when we go into character profiles and what we think's gone on. But I am enjoying it, and I would recommend it to everybody. It does feel like you're back in Middle Earth, and you know they have taken a great amount of care with the landscaping and the world building. I'm just concerned about if they've got the storytelling to get this right, really, because it feels a little bit hollow in places.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with 2 episodes in, I think it's an 8-episode series, this one, and the episodes are going to be around the same sort of length. And I believe they're commissioned 5 series. Is it 5 series?
Yeah, 5.
They've got a lot to add, and a lot they can add because it's such a rich time period, from what I understand. Yeah. So, Trevor, what do you make of episode 1 and 2?
Well, I'm going to tap on to you sort of being disappointed with Galadriel diving into the ocean so she doesn't go to Valinor by adding that's because she remembered that she didn't say goodbye to her husband Celeborn. And for me, having rewatched the first episode today, I'm trying not to be too angry about it. I mean, Jade has taken a few deep breaths around us talking because she knows that I could easily go on a rant. It's like they've made sullen teenage Galadriel and sort of disregarded the whole fact that she is sort of one of the noblest of the Noldor. And I wanted to watch the
granddaughter of Finarfin.
Yeah, and I wanted to watch the first episode again just to see if they did make any distinction between the different races of elves, and there is no distinction between them that I've picked up on. I mean, absolutely, the set pieces and it looks glorious. I want it to be glorious, so I don't want to sound like I'm sort of wanting to nitpick at it. It's just Galadriel feels very wrong at the moment. But I do want it to succeed. I do want to watch the rest of it, and like with most shows, there's always a first couple of episodes where they're laying all the groundwork. Galadriel and Elrond don't feel like Galadriel and Elrond, which is disappointing.
I agree with you there. I feel like they've sort of almost changed positions. Well, there's no magic at all. And we're going to get into Galadriel in our first segment. So there's a little bit I want to say about her even. Rich, how have you found first 2?
Well, it's a long time since I've read the source material. That's the first thing. So obviously I've got that distance from it, unlike some of you here. But I will say that the thing in terms of the epic scale, the thing that I always felt reading the books was the whole continent of Middle Earth is quite empty, if you know what I mean, because there's like vast areas that aren't, although they're owned by certain people broadly, peoples, that this huge sort of sense of scale, you know, the vastness of like sort of wild sort of periods, places of landscape and stuff. I really felt it captured that. Certainly that was my impression reading it when I was much younger. Again, that they've got sort of some of the set pieces quite nice, and all the sort of production designs lovely. I know what you mean about some of the characters. I'm not too sure about, you know, how they're going to develop, but again, it's only 2 episodes in. One thing I was disappointed by, and we can get into that later, is the portrayal of the dwarves. I know Jack has very specific. Well, it's not for the same reasons as Jack has, quite. But I felt very briefly, I felt the dwarves were portrayed as being a bit stupid, or a bit sort of like comic relief.
Comic relief. Yeah,
we got a dwarf segment coming up.
That's pretty much a continuation from
from the Hobbit
films.
But also the other thing, there's 2 things with the Harfoots. I really liked the portrayal of them, and I liked their sort of their sort of culture, their sort of proto hobbits kind of. That's a very brief way of summarising an awful lot of history there. However, I have heard some other criticisms of them, which you might be, I don't know whether you've seen that, about the accents of them, but we can get into that later on.
Yeah, we've got a segment of the Harfoots coming on.
Yeah.
I've also forgot to mention that for me, it was we jumped straight into 3 separate storylines within the first 2 episodes, and it's sort of branching off really oddly, which we'll go into later. So anyway, we'll go into the first segment, which is Galadriel, of course, is the main protagonist of the show, I would say, because she is OP as fuck. Like, one particular scene is when they're in the they're looking for Sauron, I believe, and they're climbing up the mountain. She's ahead of everyone, and then they get attacked by a snow troll, ice troll, inside the fort.
It's supposed to be Autumno, that fortress, but they don't have the rights to call it Autumno.
Oh, really?
So they've called it Durnast instead.
Oh, okay. There you go. Well, the snow troll comes out and just absolutely whoops the arses of the elves. And then she jumps in and kills him with like 1 slash. I did like the gore, though. I did like the gore with it when the blood splattered on the camera.
Yeah, that was a nice little touch. It was a nice little touch.
I find Galadriel, I don't know, I think the actress is doing well with what she's got and like what she's trying to portray. But it's so different to what I expected her. Like, there's no magic there. There's, from what I understand of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and Middle Earth, is that elves are meant to be so like distinguishable. They're meant to be so fair, so elegant. Yet she's on,
Regal.
she's on this random floating boat, floating raft with these humans, and they can't tell her from a human. Which I'll go like later on in the elf portrayal. The elves are really humanized.
Yeah,
I think they had time to really make them different, but they don't feel different.
Galadriel was meant to be about 6'9". She is epically tall.
Yeah.
In the canon, as we understand it.
And they managed to get that across in the films with was it Cate Blanchett?
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. She was what I would picture Galadriel to be: fearsome, tall, magic, and basically she's one of the eldest elves in the world, and she's like a teenager in this one. Like, I don't know, I liked her up until the trip to Valinor, and then she decided to jump in an ocean and start swimming back to Middle Earth, which was just completely stupid. I didn't understand why they put that in, why they done that. And then she just happens upon a raft.
That whole thing is nonsensical because Galadriel's banned from Valinor because she is one of the Noldor who rebelled. And rebelled, it wasn't like a war with the Valar. They disobeyed their orders to go to Beleriand, the Middle Earth, to reclaim the Silmarils. And Galadriel famously did turn down an offer to return, but it's not up to Gil-galad, who can go to and from Valinor. It's not a time portal, and he certainly has no right to command Galadriel to do anything. I mean, she's either his cousin in one timeline, or she's his aunt, his great aunt in another.
Yeah.
You know, and she's more powerful than Gil-galad. I mean, Gil-galad is a hero king and very powerful in his own right, absolutely. But Galadriel is, like, aside from Fëanor, the most powerful elf that ever existed.
Yeah, and she's just not taken seriously in the show. Like,
No,
she's warning them of all this danger, and they're basically laughing in her face and send her away. And then two or three scenes later, they're basically confirming what she's been talking about.
I've seen, they're like, 1 minute they're like, there's nothing here, and then she finds it, and they're like, here it is, and then they're like, we're leaving, and it's sort of like, well, what's the fucking point in going all that way, you know? And she's also leading a squad of Noldorin elves. These aren't just your run-of-the-day Sylvan elves or Sindarin elves that are living out in the forests. These are high elves. These are the strongest of the strong. They're probably veterans from the First Age during the War of Wrath, and they can't even kill a snow troll. You're telling me a Noldorin elf can't kill a snow troll? So and then they betray her. They just wouldn't do that. You just would not leave the granddaughter of Finarfin out in the ice.
Throw your swords down.
Yeah, I mean, it's utter disrespect for Galadriel as with her heritage, wisdom, and you're talking about the magic. They haven't even addressed the fact like with Glorfindel at the Ford of Bruinen, and we get to see it in the Battle of the Five Armies, that elves are dual-natured. When you see Arwen turn up in Lord of the Rings instead of Glorfindel, she has that different appearance because they can shine, the radiance, they glow, they have this immense power.
Yeah, they're ethereal.
Yeah, and
I just want to interject for a moment on 2 points here. This is not to disrespect the lore, but the reason they've done this with Galadriel, rightly or wrongly, the reason they've done it is that the character needs to have an arc. If the character is the same all the way through, super powerful, can do anything, even if that's in the lore, that makes for not very good drama.
This is why I liked her. This is why I liked her initially, because I didn't mind the arc of her getting the vengeance for her brother. You know, it's a trope. It's a trope, but it's a good trope.
One other thing I did want to say is, seen on the boat where they're on their way to Valinor, right? Yes, I know they're diving off it and trying to swim back to Middle Earth. Okay, that's a bit silly.
It's about 2,000 miles.
Exactly. But one thing I did like is the actual journey towards Valinor, because in the books it's all kept very vague, broadly. It's the Undying Lands, it's the endless summer or the endless spring, and all of that, and it's never quite spelled out, really.
Yeah,
it's nice. That was beautiful.
I thought that scene where that bit I really like, where they're being disrobed of their armor. You don't need your armor anymore. You go in this magical place. I really like that scene.
And they sing back, that bit's great, because did you listen to the music in the background? Not just that the elves are singing in tandem, because it becomes it's a song. It's the song of Eru Iluvatar.
Yeah.
But if you actually listen to the music in the background, it's really tempestuous, and there's a lot of different things going on in the background. I really appreciated that bit. But again, you didn't need to segue Galadriel into that point. You could have just had elves returning to Valinor.
I think they wasted a lot of time on that.
They did, and the whole water scene, actually. I know we'll get to that. Actually, we'll wait until we get to that a little bit later. I think Morfydd Clark is really well cast, though, as Galadriel.
She does have good screen presence, certainly.
Yeah.
She's a great
certainly more so than the guy playing Elrond, definitely.
To be fair, they're big shoes to step into, because they're going to be compared to Cate Blanchett and Hugo Weaving. Yeah. And that's a tough gig. I mean, respect to them for attempting to do it. I mean,
they've just got fault.
There's no fault in their performances.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just
they are great as well. They really do it well.
Yeah, they've just got to work with what they've given. So it sounds like there's a sort of a general consensus that we're not at the moment. We're really unsure about her. We don't like her portrayal, but
the show producers have said though that over the seasons she's going to mellow out, and start seeing her sort of more going into the more regal sort of wisdom that is Galadriel. I mean, obviously she's going to be given a ring as well, so you've got to remember that she's going to be involved in the rings. And
when she gets the ring of power.
There is one thing I want to bring up quickly from the first episode. Trev, you'll understand this. I really hope that scene where the elf lords are raising their swords when they're saying, "Oh, we had to go to Middle Earth for war." I really hope that isn't the Oath of Fëanor that they're trying to show, because the Oath of Fëanor, Finrod is not in that oath. It is literally just Fëanor and his sons.
Yeah.
And I just hope that is just a random council of Noldorin elves that have all committed to it, because I know that also happened. But the Oath of Fëanor is really the deep blood that actually shows or sets the scene for everything that happened in the First Age and the Second Age as well.
Yeah.
And all the damage that was caused by that particular oath. So I really do hope that they weren't trying to shoehorn Finrod into that.
I think all they've done is they've just glossed over. They're like cliff notes of the cliff notes of the First Age, and that, isn't it? Really, it's just sort of stuff happened. Here's some snapshots, but obviously we can't go into too many details. So
just glanced over. Right. Whilst we're going to that, let's go on to the next segment. We're on Elrond now. Elrond, I don't know too much about aside from what's in the Lord of the Rings books, and that was one of my great letdowns from the Lord of the Rings films, was not having his sons like at Minas Tirith and around. I hated that, but still, Elrond to me is the epitome of a leader. He's a strong leader. He's a good guy. But in this, he's basically a diplomat, ain't he? I can't really explain it. I think the guy playing him, I'm not sure of his name, but I think he's played sort of the brief perfectly. I really like him, sort of where he's sort of headed. Like, he's got balls, he's got brains, but I'd like to see the sort of warrior side of him, like we saw a glimpse of in the Battle of the Last Alliance, that sort of warrior Elrond. I hope they sort of bring that forward. But I think it's generally been okay, and I liked his interactions with Galadriel and their sort of friendship. I thought that was really put forward really well. I hated him visiting Khazad-dûm. I didn't.
Yep.
We're going onto Dwarfs later. There were some things I really liked, but there's a lot of things I really didn't. And that was one of the things I really didn't like, was Elrond in Khazad-dûm and that whole sequence with the stones and stuff. Yeah, Elrond, I haven't got much to say on him. I think I'd like to see where he goes.
Well, I've got a question for Jack, actually. My question was, now Elrond's portrayed in this series as, I won't say naive, but he doesn't seem to have quite the sort of wisdom and cunning that he does in the Lord of the Rings movies. Now, is that artistic license, or is he more like that in the older sort of age?
Well, Elrond's not from Valinor, so
Right.
Elrond was born in Middle Earth.
Right.
So he's never seen the light of the trees. So his wisdom very much comes from lived experience. So by the third age, he's been alive for 2 ages. So he has got a little bit more wisdom. So I'm actually more forgiving of the youthfulness of Elrond than I am of
Okay, because
Galadriel.
I did wonder that. I thought if they made him just a bit kind of useful, I thought, but actually, no, maybe that is he would be.
He's sort of,
yeah.
I'm sort of like, the thing that really wound me up. I actually really like Elrond's character, and I think he's been really well cast. I don't particularly enjoy the bit with the dwarfs, not because I don't like Elrond. I like Elrond. I just don't understand why Elrond's the one doing that and not Celebrimbor, because Celebrimbor is the one that has the really famous relationship with the dwarfs of Moria of Khazad-dûm, not Elrond. So I'm interested as to why they do that, but I'm sure you'll probably see that develop later on over the series. But Elrond is just emphatically, to be very factual, Elrond is definitely a lord. And that moment where they're like, "You're not a lord, you can't come to the meeting." It's like, bruv, really? Like, he's literally the son of Elwing and Eärendil and the brother of Elros, the first High King of Númenor. Like, he is quite literally a powerful elf lord in his own right. So the only thing I think they're doing about that is that they've done that is because he's not land holding at this point. Imladris or Rivendell hasn't been founded.
Yeah, they'll build that up, won't they?
Yeah, so he's the herald of Gil-galad. So at this point, I think at first it just sort of, as I said earlier, it felt like he was a bit like a Littlefinger character, where he's sort of there talking to Gil-galad and he's talking to Galadriel and being like, "Put up your sword." And I didn't really like that bit either, because it was sort of like, "You haven't seen what I've seen." And then he just truthfully is like, "I've seen my share." And she's like, "You have not seen what I have seen." And I'm like, he's definitely seen some stuff. But he's well cast. I'm not sure about the hair. But that's probably because we're used to seeing Hugo Weaving with the long hair and the angular face.
You mean Hugo Weaving with his weave? To be fair.
with his weave, yeah. But I love that bit with him talking to Celebrimbor about Fëanor and Morgul looking into the Silmaril and his teardrop reflecting him. I was like, that is OP. That is spot on, that bit. I was like, yeah, I live for those moments, and I could have just had a whole episode of those two talking. So I do like Elrond. Actually really like, how he's got tassels on his shoulders? That's like a nice little Easter egg, because his mother is Elwing, and she is actually gifted the power of shapeshifting by the Valar. So she actually turns into a swan and leads the ship of Eärendil, Elrond's father. So those are like his family crests almost.
Yeah.
So, and I like him. I think you'll see him grow into it a little bit more as well. And once he actually leaves Lindon and they get him out, sort of going to be a bit more of an emissary to the dwarves. I mean, I'd have preferred that to have been Celebrimbor. But one thing about that bit I found really funny was, 1 minute they're in Eregion, and then suddenly they're just at the doors of Khazad-dûm.
Oh
there's
yeah.
just two of them. And I'm like, have you just walked for weeks by yourselves? Without, how have you got there? Like, and where is your protection?
There's no equipment. There's no
No.
horses. That's what I've written down in one of my notes. Is that they've made that entire journey, and then Elrond just leaves him at the fucking door.
Yeah. Just, like, just trust me. Let me do my thing. And it's just like, well, that's just a wasted trip for Celebrimbor. You know,
It's like-
just walked all that way for what?
It's like, how long do I wait? Like, do I have to wait a day? Like, what? I haven't got no food. There's nothing.
Yeah. They've probably got lembas.
Yeah, there's
Just
a lot of
imagine
that
him
in this
saying,
show.
I knew we should have got something at the petrol station and we've got nothing with us. What the hell?
Well, that's the timing thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
there's a lot of things in this show where they're moving it forward just for the story, and rather than like putting in finer details, you know, all they needed was a couple of horses and maybe a little
An
escort.
honor guard.
Yeah, something.
Like, just to see elves in armor would be great, you know.
Yeah, it's just
Or some
something
different armor as well.
Yeah. Trev, what do you think of Elrond's portrayal?
Mostly okay. I mean, the one thing I didn't like in the first episode, he seemed really over familiar towards Galadriel, which again seemed to sort of be disrespectful towards Galadriel. But other than that, I'm quite interested to see what they do with him, and obviously I was like, he's got a bit of an odd looking face. There's nothing. It's just it was just like crazy sort of thing. Yeah, he was young Ned Stark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep thinking he sounds like Ramsay. Is it Ramsay?
Bolton.
Ramsay Bolton. Yeah, when he speaks, I keep hearing him.
If Celeborn's not in this, right? So that means Celebrian's not been born, which means that Elrond is like potentially having over familiarity with his future mother-in-law.
Yeah. Put up your sword, mother-in-law. What?
Yeah.
Well, that was something I was actually quite worried about, because the way they seem very friendly, I thought they're not going to make them have like a romance between those characters. I thought, well, that's going to be, even knowing as little as the lords that I know, I thought, well, that's rubbish.
Yeah,
I hope they're not going to go down that route.
thought that initially, but then it sort of really felt like a friendship to me through the screen.
I think by episode
that.
2, I was like, okay, they're not going to go that way. That's all right. Yeah.
That's why I enjoyed that, because I enjoyed the friendship. I enjoyed the interaction between them. I thought it was really well done.
My only concerns with the second episode, from what I can remember, is like, well, dwarves are meant to hold grudges. You don't upset a dwarf. You don't sort of break your word to them, and they're kind of thrown that all out the window, because Elrond tricks them to get the confrontation, to get in the door, and then concedes, and then it was quite a fun sequence, to be honest, in many ways, but it's all sort of a little bit of trickery, and it's just sort of, again, you can argue that maybe the dwarves don't look at him as an out and out elf,
Because he's half
but
elven,
but he's still sort of, dwarves don't forget things. So
We'll go into the dwarves later.
So if he's upset his friend because 50 years have passed or whatever it is, or 30 years, it's just like, your general impression of dwarves is they don't forget that. They wouldn't forgive that. So I don't know. Yeah. I'm interested to see what they do with him. He's certainly probably the more relatable of the two characters, like with Galadriel, that I'd probably want to see more of. He is about to have a very interesting time, so I'm curious to see where Elrond goes.
Yeah,
that bit where they're on the 20 years, right? First of all, if Durin was getting married, Prince Durin, and we'll go on to that bit later, but if Prince Durin's getting married, right, and he's inviting a high elf lord like Elrond's not going to not go.
No.
Okay, he's not going to snub that. That's the sort of diplomatic relations that you don't snub for a start. So yeah, they can be pissed off, but there's that whole gimmicky moment where it's like, you missed my wedding and my children being born. I'm like, oh.
It's done for comic relief, weren't it?
Yeah, you've just made Dwarfs comic relief again, and you've already got the Harfords for that. So I don't understand why you've done, but that whole sort of, a lot of people talked about this as well, where they were like, well, it sort of shows, like the difference between immortals and mortals with the time frame. but dwarfs live like 300 years.
Yeah, that's what I was
You know,
thinking.
20
20
years isn't long for dwarfs. They wouldn't even have noticed. You know, they're not too bothered by that.
Yeah.
So again, I think the overall problem that this show is going to have, and it's going to take them. It may take 1 or 2 series before it really irons out, but it's going to be that the storytelling. They don't have an actual story to go on, but they are making fan fiction, and they are sort of just going off what they can do, using the characters they can use, and it will change. I'm positive from what we've seen that they will probably, you know, in a couple of seasons it will be really much more thickly plotted, and you'll be like, oh, this is great. But at the moment, obviously, we can just nitpick gleefully at that. There's a moment between Elrond and Gil-galad which I like, but I also found the dialogue hilarious, because just before Celebrimbor sort of turns up, and Gil-galad's talking to Elrond, and they're sort of talking as the ship sails towards Valinor, and he's basically saying like, Galadriel is the old way. We must look to a new horizon. And I'm sort of like watching that bit, and I'm like, aren't you like younger than Galadriel? Like, aren't you like the same age? Like the horizon's the same thing, like for both of you. So,
Yeah.
you know, but that's actually, I really want to see more of that, because Gil-galad actually was a very strong and good influence on Elrond as well. I'm not saying that Elrond was subject to any bad influences, because he isn't, but Gil-galad really is like a very strong mentor in him, you know, to the point that he gives him his ring of power before the final battle, the War of the Last Alliance.
I wanted to briefly fly through Valinor, because it's only a bit in the beginning. I'm not too familiar with Valinor, except what's in the books that I've read. I like the intro. I know it's not canon as far as books go, but I thought it was a pretty good intro to Valinor and what it is, and the elves and all that. Even though Galadriel couldn't, as a child, she couldn't pull the arm down of that bloke or that guy who's trying to sink her ship. But then in the next scene, she tackled him. Like, yeah, little nitpicks. But I thought Valinor seemed pretty cool, and the mention of Morgoth and all that sort of stuff, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the intro. What did you guys think, as people more familiar with Valinor?
Yeah, I thought it was visually it's stunning, but you only see about 2 seconds of it. I'm not sure elf children would bully Princess Galadriel. I just don't think that would happen.
Yeah.
You know, there are hierarchies within elf society, and as I said earlier, she's like the highest of the high. But I think it was nice to see elf children actually as well, because you haven't seen elf children on screen until the series, and that's nice. And I like Finrod as a character. I liked the way that he came across actually, and the Two Trees was a lovely little bit to see. Obviously, they don't have the rights to Ungoliant, so you don't see Ungoliant sucking all the energy and the life out of the trees.
Yeah.
But they managed to like smash out the entire War of Wrath into about a 5-second clip.
Yeah, they get the point across, really.
Just like, yeah, but they went really wrong for the elves, which is really what the Silmarillion is. It's just a whole encyclopedia of them systematically finding homelands, getting destroyed, and making massive mistakes, and then ending up having to clear it all up later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved that. I really liked the boat scene. As I said, I really actually enjoyed that, and I thought the music and the singing bit was brilliant. It was really, really well done, really well choreographed.
I really liked as well how so far the orcs have been sort of portrayed, even though we've barely seen them, but they feel almost as an equal to the elves.
Well, they are.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they're not sort of cannon fodder. They actually feel like an equal. They feel like a threat, which is what I really, really like.
I'm surprised they haven't covered. I mean, I suppose they cover it a little bit in the Lord of the Rings, but obviously orcs were elves. They were just twisted and ruined.
Really tortured to fuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think, Rich? What did you think of Valinor as a almost casual?
I was surprised to see that. I was surprised to see that. I didn't think we were going to have that sort of flashback scene. To be fair.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that. I thought that's okay. I thought we were going to be straight into. I wondered if they were going to start it the way that they start Lord of the Rings, as like, you know, like the end of a battle or something like that, or to show that this is, you know, this is when the Shadow Morgoth was destroyed, or maybe start it that way. But
Yeah.
it's a much more low key, kind of almost like Elves do Hobbit Town. Almost, it was just this sort of this this idyllic. I mean, nothing wrong with it. I was just I'd say I was pleasantly surprised rather than sort of like, oh well, I'm not happy about this. No, I quite like the scene.
It was tasteful. It was tasteful.
Yeah, I think it sets up the series perfectly.
It also sets up the fact that
like the
obviously
little
Galadriel is different, or somehow that's what they're trying to establish.
Yeah. I like the snapshot of the battle as well, with like the fell beasts and all the different
Taking
creatures.
out an
The
eagle.
yeah, I thought that's fantastic, and I hope we get more of that to come, like the big set piece battles. I really, really hope so, and it's not like a CGI fest like other movies were. Trev, what did you think of Valinor?
I mean, I think Rich has pretty much summed it up. I mean, it was quite tasteful. I didn't really think that the bullion towards Galadriel was fitting. She creates this beautiful little paper boat that turns into a swan, which obviously is very symbolic of what Galadriel does in the creation of Lothlorien and that. I think they showed enough without sort of getting into you wanting to ask too many questions.
It was nice to see Eldamar there as well. You know, the city in the background.
I say it was enough, but you didn't go like into the city streets or whatever, and that which would be too much. So I thought it was done tastefully.
They spent money well spent.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to sort of when we had like when Russell T Davies was writing Doctor Who, and you got that first sort of glimpse of Gallifrey. It was kind of like that, where it was just like all you needed was sort of a sort of 5-second sequence.
Yeah,
Sort of get a lot of hype. Because obviously seeing Gallifrey in that period of new Doctor Who was pretty sort of heart pumping stuff, and seeing Valinor was the same, I think, in many ways.
Well, that's good. It sounds like the show's got that pretty right then, that the whole feeling of it at least, and money well spent for them. Next I've put boat trip, but we've already sort of spoken about the boat. You got more?
I've got more, yeah. No one's brought this up on any of the groups I'm in either. So they find these people on this wreckage. She finds these people on this wreckage, and they get her on. And then the Leviathan type thing comes along and smashes it up, and then she's out there floating with Halbrand. And then he's like, I'm from the Southlands, with a real Yorkshire accent. But she's come from Linden, which is like thousands of miles coastline that's relatively uninhabited, and they're refugees that have managed to get all that way up north. And then at the end of it, end up back towards Numenor, which is again back the other way. So how the hell has their wreckage managed to get all the way up the coastline and back down?
It's all to move the plot forward, isn't it?
But I just feel like it's just a pointless waste of money to do that.
Yeah, they do. They've done it quite a bit in this series. It's literally just to move the plot forward, and you got the dune-like worm, but for the sea.
But our Pharazôn, who is at this point the High King of Numenor, is having breakdowns in diplomatic relations with the Elves of Linden. But before that, for centuries and centuries, the Elves of Linden are almost worshipped like gods by the men of Numenor. Their relationship is very, very tight, very strong. So I don't really see why they needed to do that. They could have just sent Galadriel. They could have said people are going back to Valinor, and then you see that wonderful scene. And then he sort of says, I have a quest for you, commander of the Northern armies. Go to Numenor. And then they send her to Numenor. They could have done that instead without having to have all of that time out at sea that just sort of fills nothingness and doesn't really. I know you think it might further the plot, but for me, it didn't really further the plot.
Yeah, it's just for the writers, isn't it? They sort of get stuck with Galadriel on this boat, then they've got to get her back. So it's all convenient plot devices, really.
It's almost like they're doing the complete opposite to what Tolkien does, which is a journey is an adventure. And it's just like, well, it takes the Fellowship like over a year to do the quest to destroy the ring, and they travel hard for their miles. It's like you get this full-on descriptions, and we've covered more miles than what the Fellowship covers in blinks in like cut scenes.
And that's just the sea as well.
Yeah,
It's literally just the sea.
Which I suppose is one of those things that sort of is a completely different look at the world, because really when you've played the role-playing games or online gaming and that, there's always a bit of emphasis on there's a journey to be had and there's no easy journey.
yeah.
And here we get in, like with Elrond and Celebrimbor going to Khazad Dûm. It's just like, oh yeah, we just like
Just appear
just turned around the corner. There it is. Oh, there it is.
with the same clothes they were wearing in the previous scene.
Yeah.
Eregion and Khazad Dûm are fairly close, but I'm pretty sure Eregion was built because of their relationship with the dwarves, and it was because of the mithril trade that was coming through. Massive body of water it's built on as well. It didn't look anything like what I thought it would.
Yeah, very pretty though. Okay, we'll jump on Harfoots now then.
Harfoots and hobbits.
The second of 3 story sub stories.
Absolutely love the portrayal of them. Really like them, sort of like an interesting sort of, not quite feral, but certainly sort of living in the sort of the forest and stuff like that. And there's some kind of, there has been some criticism of them. Are they being portrayed as sort of Irish travellers or Roma people and that kind of stuff? And that has got some pretty strong criticism from some quarters. And I'm not of that background, so I can't really.
The stage Irish wasn't a good look on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the person who developed the accent said it had Irish as its base and then took it in other directions. So, but I can't really sort of comment on that. Although interestingly, there was this fairly savage review, I think, in the Irish paper that said, despite the awful portrayal of these people as Irish, it's still quite good, the series. I think so.
Yeah,
I think they said that, but. I'm surprised. I tell you what, I'm most surprised by Lenny Henry's performance, because I thought he was going to be rubbish.
Oh, he was
fantastic.
Really,
he was really good.
No, he was brilliant.
No. I was expecting him to be not so good, but he was excellent.
Really?
He was very well. I've seen him in a few other things where he's been okay, but no, he's very good. Very good. I was impressed by his performance. I really liked the character and the way he sort of, I really liked him. I'm looking forward to seeing more of his character.
Yeah, I really liked the Harfoots. I felt they sort of made it Lord of the Rings, turned it from fantasy to sort of Middle Earth. Because they're not allowed to use hobbits, are they? They're not allowed to say hobbits. That's why they come up with Harfoots.
They can't really say Harfoots in the second age either, because they don't appear till the third age.
All right.
Yeah, but they have the rights to that because it's in the appendices. They can say hobbits, but they've chosen to say Harfoots.
Oh, okay.
And Harfoots are hobbits. They're not proto-hobbits. They're just.
No, they're not. Okay.
They're just a tribe of hobbits. They're just a hobbit.
I really liked them. I really like the nomadic. I really like the.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
They sort of, and the fact that they hide from humans.
Yeah,
that was brilliant. That bit.
Yeah, I thought they were fantastic, and I liked the little village. I liked all the costumes. That's one thing I haven't commented on, is the costumes in this have been fantastic as well.
Before we get to that, I liked Lenny Henry's big book. I forget the name of the character, but
I thought of you when I saw that.
I like the big sort of law book with all these sort of pictures of the stars and all that kind of thing. He's like the keeper of the law, and I really like that. I like that touch.
Like what to be scared of. There's that list of like what do we fear.
Well, it also shows the beginnings of that kind of, because when you see the hobbits later on, where they're all more sort of sedentary and not nomadic, they have. Everybody seems to have books everywhere, and writing seems to be a big part of their culture and storytelling. And this is we see the beginnings of that, why books are important, because they have.
They're also hobbits are also very shy, even in the Shire. They are still very difficult to locate, and if you want to find them and they don't want to be found, you can't find them.
What's that classic line in the Hobbit? What's the line? Hobbits don't have magic, but apart from the everyday sort, so they can hide from people like us.
Yeah,
big folk.
Yeah, I think they're superb, the Harfoots. I really liked it. I was really dubious about it as well at first. I was like, for God's sake, this is just going to be pointless, and they're just doing it because it's going to put seats on bums. But the whole time I was like, I'm always prepared to be, happily surprised, and I really, really enjoy it actually.
Yeah.
And it gives a little bit of innocence to it as well, which second age is kind of really lacking in innocence.
Yeah.
There's
I'm also
horrible
quite
stuff
taken
going
by
on.
those big baggy trousers they all wear. I'm not saying I'm going to buy a pair, but I'm tempted.
Yeah, I thought they were
I'm so-
fantastic. The little girl. What is her surname?
Nori Brandyfoot.
Oh right, I misheard it because I thought she's going to be the long lost ancestor of
Brandy
The
Bucks.
Brownfeet.
Brandy Bucks. Yeah,
Why have they called them Brandyfoots? Because they're not even living in the area of the Shire, and the Brandy Bucks actually come from the River Brandywine, so that's why their name becomes the Brandy Bucks. So it feels like they've just sort of tried to take bits from the Third Age for namesakes and put them onto halflets, which is fine actually.
yeah,
you know.
a bit of familiarity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's familiarity. It's a nice little hat tip, but like if you're going to go down like, which I quite enjoy, if you want to go down like the sacred lore and be a bit of a, you know, I'm not actually gatekeeping for people. Like I'm trying my hardest not to be like that. If people are really enjoying it, I'm really happy for them because I'm actually really enjoying it as well. But I do like to go down the whole lore side of things and look at the origins of their names and be like, well, hang on a second, that shouldn't have come about until they're in the Shire because there isn't a River Brandywine. But
Yeah,
it's all good fun.
yeah. What do you think,
I've got my fingers crossed, you know, for Marcho Proudfoot. I want to see him.
What do you think, Trev, of the Harfoots?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like they're hobbits. We all know they're hobbits.
Yeah.
And the hobbits are one of the most beloved things in Tolkien's work. So I'm interested to see where they go with them. It's just really Meteor Man. It's that whatever plot they run with that it's a little bit of a concern, but we'll see what happens.
So that goes on to like the whole second plot. So you got Galadriel, the Galadriel plot. You got the Half-Foot Mystery Man plot, and then you've got the Romeo and Juliet plot, which we'll come back to. I thought this the Mystery Man. Initially, my hands are in the air. Initially, when I see the comic coming over, I'm thinking they've actually got Tom Bombadil in it, and that's going to be him, or one of the five wizards. I don't know.
I said that actually it was just a meteor and it hit Tom Bombadil in the head while he was out having a naked stroll, and he's Tom Bombadil with concussion.
Yeah. I think that'd be great if it is. I think it'll be a good little nod.
It won't be. It won't be. Already the way he uses his power is just not going to be Tom Bombadil. He's the most ancient being, isn't he, Tom Bombadil, or something?
Yeah. I would love it to be Tom Bombadil. If Rings of Power did one thing, if it brought Tom Bombadil to the screen, I would give it so much respect because Tom Bombadil is such.
I've said my deal breaker for Rings of Power is if they get the Harfoots discovering pipeweed by the end of the 5th season, then I'll be happy.
But it's just like that's like the outside shot is it's Tom Bombadil. I think it's Sauron. I mean,
so we calling it. I'm saying Tom Bombadil. Are you saying Sauron, Trev?
Yeah.
Jack, who do you think? One of the five wizards, Tom Bombadil?
It can't be the wizards. I'll kick off if it's one of the wizards. I'll be out in the street shouting at the moon. I don't think it's any of them. I think it's a new made-up character, and I think it's a Maya that's been sent to warn them.
Is that like one of the angels or something?
Well,
the Maya is what Sauron are, and they're like the servants of the Valar. They're more powerful than
the wizards. The wizards are Maya.
Yeah, the Astari are. Sauron was a Maya. The Balrogs are Maya. Goldberry is a Maya.
I saw something that predicted that he was a Balrog.
Yeah, he's not going to be a Balrog. Balrogs don't take human form. I do have a question about the Balrog later on because we have seen a shot of the Balrog, but we'll talk about that with the dwarf bit.
Yeah.
I think it's a Maya that's been sent down. It possibly could be a blue wizard because there's a lot of different writings about different things, but I think in the Unfinished Tales they mentioned the blue wizards came in the Second Age.
Oh, there you go.
And then they went out east to cause disruption to Sauron's plans, and then they came back and then were sent back again. So there is that possibility. I think that's right. I'm pretty sure that's right.
I've seen that theory that the reason that they were never heard from again is because they they succeeded in what they were doing, but paid
Yeah.
the price for it. But the wizards aren't meant to turn up till the start of the Third Age, are they?
It's not until 1,000 years after the ring has been cut from Sauron's hand
Yeah.
when
So-
Sauron comes again.
I mean, I suppose there is the theory it could be Gandalf, but before it's Gandalf.
No.
No, well, yeah, because
Um,
Gandalf walked amongst the elves, unseen at times, or as an old man, as when he was known as a Lorin or a Lorien. And he was actually sent at the request of Manwë. Manwë was sort of said, you must go and counter Sauron with Curufin. No, not Curufin. Well, Saruman, basically.
Yeah.
And
Curufin,
Gandalf.
isn't it?
Yeah, Curunir, that's it, not Curufinwë is one of Fëanor's sons. Yeah, Curunir is Saruman, and Saruman was the greatest of the Astari, but Gandalf was the wisest, really, and the best. And Manwë said, you must go, and Gandalf sort of said, well, I'm scared of Sauron. And he said, that's why you need to go. You need to go and face him. And that's why, Third Age is really Gandalf's age. It's all about what Gandalf did to sort of, thwart Sauron and being the best he can be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty certain that Sauron's original mystery identity is claiming he's been sent by the Valar to help out on Middle-earth.
Well, that's what he tells Ar-Pharazôn. But Ar-Pharazôn actually marches the army of Numenor over to Mordor, conquers Mordor, captures Sauron, and then brings him back to Numenor. So we may have to. They may change that, though. It may just be that he's the big mystery.
Sauron the Deceiver.
Yeah.
Well, he's called Anatar as well, but then also, Trev, I sent you the link. Was it last night or the night before? The actor has come out and said to one of his mates in private that his character is called Anatar. So either that's been deliberately linked or leaked, or it's
It could be a cunning misdirect, but I don't know. I feel like he's probably Sauron.
Yeah.
Does that mean he's going to smash open the Harfoots and just destroy them?
Well, that's the thing that doesn't make sense to me, because obviously the whole thing with Frodo and Bilbo and it being the task of the halflings, the hobbits, to destroy the ring is because they're an unknown factor to Sauron.
Yeah.
It's so
they're resistant to magic, aren't they? There's a sort of resistance.
Yeah. So to have this early encounter with them seems, if it is Sauron's, just seems a little bit not quite right. But
that goes on to what I was thinking. I'm really hoping there's some characters in this that we can build to and love, and they just have the balls to kill them. Like
Game of Thrones style.
Yeah, imagine they just wiped out the Harfoots. Like that. Like back to the boat when the worm come along and just killed everyone. I was not expecting that, and I'm just hoping we see more of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, some good theories there. We'll see where that goes if he can learn to speak. It amazed me that she was trying to teach him sign language when he really couldn't speak. So if you can't speak, how can you learn sign language? How can you understand what you're trying to get across?
I liked that proto-Denethor moment, when he's eating the snails. All I could think of was Denethor eating tomatoes.
The tomatoes. Oh, it's still gross.
We've had that in all Lord of the Rings, Tolkien Legendarian films now. You've had fucking Stephen Fry eating testicles, and you've had the tomatoes, which is the most tasteful bit, and then and now you've got Snail Man.
Right. Next, I was going to move on to. We will go on to elves, but first I was going to talk about Arondir and his love story.
I like him.
When he, because he's with the Watchtower, and I really, really like that. He feels to me a mixture of Aragorn and Legolas sort of thing. I really, really like him, but I hate the story he's involved in. I hate this Romeo and Juliet shit. I hate the fact that lad is with them and he's not acknowledged him as his son or anything when it's quite clearly his son.
No, I don't think that's the case.
I don't know.
Oh, you reckon that's what it is, and that they've already done it?
Yeah, because they've been seeing each other for a little while. They're obviously really familiar with each other.
I didn't think he'd told her he loved her until that moment when they're getting ready to pull back. That was the vibes I got. You reckon he's his dad?
I'm with Jack there.
I think he's dad because the young lad's a mixed race and the mum's white.
No, they've already mentioned that there's only been 2 unions of elves and men.
Oh, really?
It didn't end out well. Yeah, he was talking about that with the other warden that he was walking towards the.
Depends how
The
much of a
towel with.
secret he's kept it, because when he went into the bar, the woman quickly left, so like no one would find out. And he's been there for what, 80 years, or was it 60 or 80 years?
79, I think it is.
79 years, yeah, something like that. Looking over that village, they're saying something that they were aligned to Morgoth, and yeah, it's quite a lot of depth there that probably didn't need to happen. And I really did enjoy that. I found it all quite boring.
No,
I really liked him.
love that. I'm loving that because, you know, the old argument, well, it's not even an argument, but the old remarks that people make, that there's not enough diversity in the representations of what we've seen on screen before. You start putting stuff out in the East, and you can sort of justify that to all the people that only want to approach it from a lore perspective. Like, and I like seeing the East and stuff there, so I like them setting that groundwork and sort of being like, yeah, we were the men who allied with Sauron and Morgoth before. So I think that sorts in well. But that kid is definitely going to be the Witch King. he's definitely, he's just a miserable teenage boy.
The Witch King of Angmar.
Yeah, and he's got the sword, and the sword is growing, and and he's the fucking Witch King, man. He's the Witch King.
Yeah, I really hope they flesh this bit out and something comes of it. I did love the orc scene. I thought that was terrifying. I thought that was really good.
I think the other thing that's probably interesting with this storyline is they got a lot of creative freedom, and I think that's telling in that they're not tied down by sort of, well, it's Elrond, it's Galadriel, it's Celebrimbor. It's just that we got new characters almost. It's there's a bit of freedom there, that they can indulge themselves a bit.
The new characters feel better written than the lore characters. I said this in the Tolkien Society yesterday in one of the conversations about it. And it's one of the reasons why you'll probably find that we're feeling a bit disenfranchised with Galadriel and Elrond, is that they're so well written in the books and on what we already know, that for them to make these changes just feels like a bigger betrayal than possibly what the writers are seeing, because obviously the writers know a lot more about what they're writing than we do.
Yeah.
But Arondir really feels like a proper Lord of the Rings sort of Tolkienian elf. I wonder, he can't be. Is he Noldorin, or is he going to be a Sylvan elf, or is he going to be a Sindarin, or possibly Teleri? Because obviously he's come from the West and he was a grower. He says, but is he a Noldor? Because I always thought the Noldor had either really long. Well, I suppose they don't all have long hair either. But he definitely feels like a Tolkienian elf. He plays the part really well. He's got that sort of like almost like, I'm not totally here in the realm of the mortals. I'm also in my immortal realm, but I'm able to hold a conversation with you, and there's a kindness to him. And I'm looking. I think in the next episode, you're going to see him go. I've already thought, what's that bit in? Is it Return of the Jedi when Luke has to fight the creature?
Yeah.
The Narlak, or what's it called? I don't know.
The Rancor.
The Rancor. They're going to have an orc Rancor type thing, and he's going to be made because they've captured him. They're going to make him fight it.
Yeah. I did really like him. I think his costume is fantastic as well. Like all the Watch elves, I thought they were brilliant, and I liked his superior as well. His captain.
Yeah, he was badass.
Yeah. I thought they were done really, really well, and they're about the best of the elves I felt in the show so far. Really, that's the most I liked of the elves.
I like the way that he carries his bow, the way he puts it over his arm, but that's like you can just sort of like flick it down, fire it. I quite liked that sort of style of carrying the bow. There's a lot of little details.
I feel like Gil-galad is just too wooden.
Yeah.
There's just no personality from him at the moment. He's
too much
of
like a Roman politician sort of thing.
He's just up his own arse. And we're very grateful for that. And I'm like, fuck off, you're Gil-galad. You're a warrior king. And you're loved by everyone, and you have your own poem written about you, and you're the epic hero of the war, the Last Alliance, and it just feels too much like they've overemphasized that he's the High King. And now they've sort of almost put him at odds with Galadriel, whereas I think Arondir, you get a little bit more elven emotion out of him than you do out of the others.
Yeah.
This moves us on to the elves. How do we think the elves are portrayed? I I touched on it earlier. I don't like it because I like the idea of the elves being the fairest of all beings. This elegance, this nice, like when Arwen shows up and she's just got the glow. Like, I think they've missed a trick here and they've made them too human.
Yeah, they haven't covered the dual nature, which is a big thing for elves, especially Tolkien elves. So I agree with you there.
I want to cover that actually when I discuss dwarfs with you, because I do have a very passionate argument for certain issues. I know that Trev, you have a different view, but yeah, I did you know? Right, this one's great. There's only one reference in the entire of Tolkien's Legendarium, the entire of Tolkien's work, that elves having pointed ears, and it's one singular elf as well. It's not the actual elves.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
That is literally like a new thing that elves have pointed ears. It's not as old as what Tolkien was writing at all.
Oh wow!
I suppose the other thing is, it's like in The Hobbit, which is quite in terms of comparing it to Lord of the Rings, it doesn't have quite the detail. And when they're in Mirkwood and you've got the wood elves there seem very human.
Yeah.
Well, the wood elves are slightly different to the high elves that we're used to seeing be ethereal. The high elves walked in the light of the two trees. The wood elves are Moriquendi. They're not like Wendy, so they never saw the light of the trees. They came over. They're Sylvan elves, so they came over in the very beginning, before the sun and the moon were made, and it was just the lamps. It was the lanterns, I think, that were lighting it then, starlight. So they haven't seen the light of the trees. It's only Noldor elves and Lyaquendi and the elves back in Valinor, the Eldar, that have stayed there. So there is a reason that they're a bit more feral. Their magic is different as well.
Yeah.
They're a bit more aggressive than Noldor. Although all we're seeing at the moment is aggressive Noldor. It's actually the other way around. Throughout the series, I like how they're depicted. I'm not too bothered by short-haired elves.
No.
I'm struggling I'm struggling with it a little bit sometimes, because they do look too human because of it. But I'm not bothered. It's not a hill I'm going to die on. There are some bits where I'm like, oh, they're all fucking short-haired. But I think it's done okay. I'm not a big fan of Linden fashion though. It's just too Roman. Yeah, you're right there, Hamish. It's just Roman. Whereas I like what Celebrimbor's wearing. That to me is like, I don't know what the texture or the stuff is called, but it looks more like what I'd imagine an elf to wear. It sort of hangs off of them effortlessly, and he sort of carries himself. Celebrimbor's well cast, even though he's supposedly younger than Galadriel and Gil-galad. He actually looks much older, but Celebrimbor's quite well cast.
Yeah, I think they've cast it well, like on a whole. I don't think any of the actors are really doing a terrible job, to be honest.
No.
As somebody who absolutely despises elves, I actually quite like them. So
yeah, you're not too keen. What do you think, Trev? Because I gathered that you're a big fan of elves.
Yeah, I do love the elves. I've always loved the elves since the first time I read Lord of the Rings when I was about 12. So yeah, I suppose they're trying to not do Peter Jackson's visuals. I mean, I think I've talked about this with Jack before. I mean, obviously, when Peter Jackson made Lord of the Rings, he cherry-picked all the artists that had been doing Lord of the Rings art one way or another for 20, 30 years. I mean, Rich mentioned earlier, like, the animated film of Lord of the Rings, that for someone of my age, there's like that carried us through the wilderness years before we got the Peter Jackson films.
Yeah, where they're green in The Hobbit, aren't they?
Yeah.
Green skin.
Well, I had the Alan Lee illustrated versions. I've still got them somewhere, but the Alan Lee illustrated versions of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and I just absolutely loved how Peter Jackson used that sort of imagery.
Yeah, and obviously for Rings of Power, it's a different age, so you don't want everything to be exactly the same. You don't want it to be dissimilar. You want it to feel the same. I guess it kind of does. I mean, I was looking at some of the armor and going, it doesn't look very elven. It looks a little bit clunky.
Gondorian.
It looks like
Yeah.
I don't even think it looked Gondorian. I think it looks like Milanese plate steel that they were wearing at Agincourt.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is just like it didn't look
Yeah.
quite right. But again, it's one of those things I can look past that. It's more a case for me. As I said earlier, Galadriel was meant to be really tall. A lot of the elves are taller than men, but then
Except
even
Numenorians are very tall.
Numenorians are meant to be quite tall. Aragorn is tall.
Boromir is supposedly huge, isn't he? He's
Yeah.
like a big, mighty man as well.
A warrior, isn't he?
The
Yeah.
lords of old, yeah. So it's, I don't know. I think it's one of those things that, without wanting to get into the political correctness arena too much, they're casting diversity really well, and I think part of that means some things do get lost in translation, because when it was written, obviously it was a different world, and like with Lord of the Rings, there's very few female characters in the story, and nowadays we want to, like with the Hobbit trilogy, they created female characters to be included.
We're not going down the Toriel path. We'll never end. I'll rant for hours about that.
But I think sort of, let's say, the characters we're getting and the elves, I'm not disappointed. It's like I really don't care that the elves have got short hair. So what? I mean,
I don't care that they've cast people of color at all. I don't see what people kicked off about it for at all. And there's actually, on that note, I shared it when they first released pictures of the Harfoots. The first thing Tolkien writes about Harfoots is they're brown of skin. So anybody saying, well, it's not reflective of what Tolkien wrote. Well, fucking read the books, because actually you'd be very surprised, that he's written that. So, and if you can't see past that, then you need to take a long look in the mirror and give your head a wobble.
And the other thing is, this is an imagined history of our world, of our peoples across the world. So you have to include all those things in this past world, this fantasy world. So
yeah, exactly. As long as characters are portrayed the same as they are in the books, and any new characters are just really well written, I don't really care how they look. As long as they look cool.
yeah. I mean, are we going to see sort of the type of Legolas action we got in the movies? Probably not. And it's well, that's okay as well.
I think we will.
We will. We've already seen it with the snow troll.
Yeah, but it wasn't. That if that was Legolas fighting that, and Peter Jackson had choreographed and filmed it, it would have been a lot more extravagant.
Yeah. Like the olive font.
It was done quite straightforward brutality.
Yeah.
Any Noldorin warrior would be able to take down a snow troll. I just think they just really misrepresented it there. And I know that Rich was right. Obviously, I know why they're doing all the things they're doing. It's how you build the story. It's how you get familiarity. And also, this is a £1 billion project. Okay, so whilst we may sit here and have great fun talking about it and geeking out and sort of nitpicking bits with change we don't like, this has got to go out to a much wider audience than just Tolkien fans, and it will drive people that are Tolkien fans, the red shirt sort of like die-hard Tolkien fans that have been reading the books year on year for decades. It'll drive them up the wall, and I'm one of them. Okay, and I had to come to terms with it well in advance that this was not going to be what I would have done or what I would want. But at the end of the day, it's great. It is great, and I am really looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing Middle Earth on screen again, and I think that's.
I do want to enjoy this show. As much as I might be, blah blah blah, etc. I want to enjoy it. I want it to be a success.
Yeah, I'm strapped into the ride.
Yeah, same. It's coming from a place of enjoyment. It might sound like we're sort of being like, oh, well, they didn't do this, no, we didn't do that. But, we're not saying don't watch it at all. We're saying, this is great. We get to have these conversations,
Yeah.
And I'm loving it. I've said it in the Tolkien Society. I am loving nitpicking it. I'm having so much fun.
Yeah. It's all the fun, ain't it?
Yeah.
with that, we come on to the Dwarfs, which is the last. I have written put a segment down for Sauron and Morgoth, which we've already touched upon quite a lot. So we can sort of finish off with Dwarfs and then go on to where we want to see the series go very briefly. Now the Dwarfs, yeah, I liked how I'm really confused by all the greenery in Khazad-dûm. That really confused me.
That's because they have great mirrors. Gimli talks about this. They have great, huge, giant mirrors. They actually show that, which I thought was wonderful.
Yeah, I thought it looked amazing. I thought it looked absolutely amazing. I really, I sort of like the dwarf costumes. I didn't like the comedy value. I really didn't like the comedy value, but I've always been a sucker for dwarfs. In any RPGs I play, I always play the dwarfs.
Same, yeah.
I like the armor. I like.
That really, I did not like that.
I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was better than what they put in The Hobbit, but obviously, like during. I didn't like the comedy. I didn't like the mention of the wedding and the kids. Although
they just created 2 new members of the line of Durin as well.
Yeah, one of the big bugbears of like people leading up to this was the Queen Dwarf. It was turns out to be his wife. I really liked her. I thought she was funny, and but she didn't. Again, she felt human. She didn't feel like a dwarf. None of them felt like dwarfs. They just felt like comedy acts. I want to see badass dwarfs that stiff-faced and don't take the shit from themselves, just walking into their home, and tricking them. And it really, I don't know, it was one of the poorer things for me out of it. It all looked amazing, but again, the portrayal just wasn't there for me. And I hope we see it fleshed out, and I hope we get something better out of it. Now, Jack, Mr. Dwarf himself.
I'm going to let Trev go before I go on my epic tirade of what they've done wrong with the dwarf.
I'm prepared to edit it down.
No, you won't need to.
Yeah, I won't. Go on, Trev.
For the most part, I mean, I like the dwarves in the stories. In The Hobbit, in particular, you see a lot more of dwarves in The Hobbit than you do Lord of the Rings. And it is nice to see Moria as a living inhabited place. I mean, the one thing I know some people are going, what was in the box? What was in the box? And
Mithril.
I was going to say, I think that's the discovery of Mithril.
Yeah, I saw people saying it's the Nauglamir, and they're like, oh, it could be the Nauglamir. It's not going to be the fucking Nauglamir. The Nauglamir was gone. It's been gone for thousands of years. And it's not going to be the Silmaril, because that undoes the entire point of the Silmarillion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've got in one of the trailers a scene of a Balrog. So, and obviously, we know Moria comes to an end because they mine too deeply for Mithril. And
but that's 2 Durins later.
Yeah, well, obviously, with the timeline, and I know that there's a nice story they can tell there, and sort of, I know, a tragedy of these. I know the human elements to the dwarves, because obviously all we're led to believe from the books is that dwarves, it's very rare to see a female dwarf, which obviously is why there's the rumours about you can't tell male and female dwarves apart. I mean, it was an enjoyable sequence. I know it was comedy. I didn't mind that, but then I say it is a little bit disappointing to see dwarves relegated to comedy support when they've got so much more going on with them. And obviously, it's one of those things, because Tolkien obviously loved his elves probably more than the dwarves. There's a lot more written about elves than there are dwarves. So I know there's some artistic license there they can explore, but I'm not a big fan of it just for comedy value. This is a great period of time to see sort of the friendship of Celebrimbor and his elves with the dwarves. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Definitely interesting to see what happens. I say the wife was amusing. Again, it's comedy.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing the interactions as well between the elves and the dwarfs.
Yeah. It's like, let's wait and see what happens. And
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what we can do at the moment.
yeah,
And then hear Jack's rant.
I say it is a problem for me that obviously Durin had issue with Elrond, and dwarves generally don't ever drop those issues. That's one of the reasons why the friendship between Legolas and Gimli in Lord of the Rings is so precious and so meaningful. Because obviously there's already been a lot of bad blood between elves and dwarves.
Well, it's just already going down that typical trope of the elves using the dwarves as a workforce.
Yeah.
Which is what they did. They did that in the First Age as well.
Yeah.
Although I suppose it was for Finrod, and Finrod was a great friend of the dwarves. It wasn't like, that it happened after Finrod was gone that there was a war of dwarves and elves.
Yeah.
And that was over a Silmaril.
Yeah, again, yeah. So I'm happy to see where they go with it, and I'm not disappointed by the dwarves. I suppose I don't want to see them just being used for comedy value. That would be too lame. I say having a little bit of a nice introduction, cool, but let's see some serious dwarvish.
Yeah.
Well, you saw a little bit of that at the end with where Peter Mullen, who plays Mother Superior in Trainspotting, he plays Durin the Third. He's the king of Khazad-dûm, and he sort of has quite a serious chat with Durin, the Prince Durin. God damn it. So, okay, can I segue now into my little rant?
It's all on you, Jack.
Yeah, okay, it's not going to be a rant. So, like, most people who know me know how passionate I am for Lord of the Rings, but they know in particular that I have a real burning thing for dwarfs. I just think they're so cool. But their lore and their history is incredible, and because there's so little written about them in terms of in comparison to elves, I kind of get really defensive when I see them treated like comic value, or that their lore is changed in any way. And this is the only time you'll see me get really gatekeeperish. Do what you like with elves. I don't give a shit. Do whatever you like with elves. Do what you want with hobbits. Do what you want with men. There's plenty of them. They're everywhere. Don't touch the dwarves. Just leave them be. And the thing that they've met, the timeline is really weird because it's Durin the Sixth who dies. That's where Durin's Bane, the Balrog, comes up. Dwarf women do have beards. Okay, they do have beards, and there are 3 separate bits in 3 separate books written by Tolkien where dwarf women are noted for having beards. They are exceptionally rare. They make up 1/3 of dwarf populations. They are guarded very preciously, but they do have beards. And the producers of this were asked that question at Comic-Con, and they said dwarf women have beards, just not Princess Disa. But I haven't seen a single female dwarf with a beard yet.
There's a few. There's a good half dozen.
And it's not like, and it's more in the Peter Jackson movies, some people have tried making excuses for Princess Disa. They've been like, oh, she's got a little bit of stubble on her cheeks. No, she doesn't. And that's not a beard. We all know that we're men, we grow facial hair. We can tell you now, that doesn't count. That's cat weasel, that is. But Princess Disa, I don't really like the name because, like, it's a hat tip to Dis. And I'm sort of like, well, you've got the rights to Lord of the Rings. If you do your own series later on about Lord of the Rings and you put Dis in it, they'll probably think that Dis is just Disa and they'll get confused. I think they should have just created a whole new name for her. But she is a revelation as well. She's been great, and I love her in it. I think she plays the part so well. She reminds me a bit of Molly Weasley.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So I was like, well, that's great. I don't like that you missed my wedding thing. And I don't like that he's Prince Durin. Like, Durin is not just a name. Durin he is the reincarnation of Durin the Deathless, the first father of the dwarves who slept and awoke under Mount Gundabad. The father of the Longbeards. There can't be 2 Durins at one time.
It's like Caesar, isn't it? It's like the title Caesar.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, but it's also due to the fact that they're so alike in mannerisms and appearance. Durin is the mightiest of all the dwarf lords. There is some diversity in Khazad-dûm, and that's brilliant because actually at this time, I'm presuming Disa isn't a Longbeard because, well, obviously because she's black and Durin's white. But the other thing is that at that time when people were living in when dwarfs were migrating in numbers to Khazad-dûm, because the Blue Mountains and the western dwarf lands had all sunk under the sea with Balerion. So there was a lot of Broadbeams and Firebeards that moved down into Khazad-dûm as well, and that's really what helped with the great work you see there. And I love that, you know, when the two dwarf kids are running around with the helmets on, the little heads on.
Yeah.
One of them is, I paused it on that now because I've got it on in the background. One of them is the dragon helm of Dorlomin. It's Turin Taranbar's helmet, which was made by a dwarf. So it's a nice little Easter egg that they put in there.
Wow.
And I thought that was great. I don't really mind the rock smashing bit. I thought that was quite cool. I just wish that it wasn't Elrond there. I know why they've done it, and I appreciate it, but I would rather it was Celebrimbor, because in the books, Celebrimbor is a great friend to the dwarves. You know, they are really, really close, really tight, and hopefully they show that, because this is before the doors of Durin have been built. You know, when you're in the Fellowship and they're outside where the Watcher in the Water is.
Yeah.
They're not melons yet.
Melon.
Yeah, they're actually those dwarf doors were actually made with the elves. That's why it's written in Elvish rather than Dwarvish in Khuzdul. So Celebrimbor did that with Narvi. So we should see Narvi at some point. Narvi is the great craftsman of the dwarves at this period in time. I really hope it isn't during the fourth that they kill off with the Balrog, because that's not for a very long time.
Yeah.
But obviously, we know that they're compressing the timeline.
But again, I'm like, well, why have you given it to during the fourth then? There's two more Durins. Just do it with during the sixth if you're not going to play around with stuff. If you're going to play around with stuff like that. I really like seeing. My favourite bit of The Hobbit is when they show you what Erebor looks like. So I hope we see more of Khazad-dûm. I really hope we see more of the other lands as well that dwarves have, because obviously there's further north, there's the Grey Mountains, although that isn't settled for a little bit. There is the Iron Hills. There's Dunland as well. They've put them in Dunland, and the Blue Mountains have still got dwarfs in them too. So, and the dwarfs fight in the battle against Sauron. They don't mention that enough, but the dwarfs do have quite a significant part to play. And when Sauron conquers Eregion, the elves flee through Khazad-dûm, and Galadriel passes through Khazad-dûm, and that's where they find Lorelland, which becomes Lothlorien. So the dwarves are more friends to the elves than people really realise. I think that goes down to what Trevor's saying, is that, you know, they just don't forget. They're quick, because they also are. I think the lady who played Sophia Nonvet, the person who plays Princess Disa, she says, you know, dwarfs very much wear their heart on their sleeve, and, you know, when they're comfortable, and they're really big on their emotions in a really sort of like rah kind of way. And I love that about them. I think that they play that. They do that. Yeah, I'm not sold on the costume design, and that's probably just personal preference, because I really liked the Peter Jackson designs of what Gimli was wearing and the other dwarfs.
Yeah.
I didn't like the Battle of the Five Armies because they looked just too CGI and too generic. I've always imagined dwarf armies to have just be the commonplace dwarfs, a bit like the way the Men of Rohan are. They've all got their own sort of kit that they wear, and then you have the Royal Guard, and they'll have really beastie outfits. But I'm like
rugged soldiers.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sort of thinking that I quite like the masks that they're wearing. It's just preference on it, but yeah, dwarf women have beards, man, and they do. They really do. I mean, there's too much humanizing going on of the elder races, and I've said this for years and years. It's not just happening in Lord of the Rings stuff; it's happening all over the place. There's just too much making stuff human now, and I just think that at times when you're looking at them, it's difficult to tell if Disa is a woman or if she's a dwarf woman. You know, you could just think she's just a woman. It's only because of the height difference that you see between her and Elrond that you wouldn't notice. And I just want there to be more distinction. So that's all it is. I think she plays the part fucking brilliantly, and I hope they don't kill her off. I hope that if they do wake the Balrog up, I hope she escapes. But
I hope they go mad and kill loads of characters, because we know like the likes of Elrond and Galadriel are safe. So there's not going to be much tension there, but you want some lovable characters to be in danger.
I really want to see the dwarfs fighting armies of them fighting, not just like charging goats and then suddenly all the goat riders disappear. and you know what I mean? I don't want it to sort of make no sense. I hope it's really well choreographed. Or
Yeah.
I'd like, what would be cool is if you see an invasion of Moria.
Yeah.
Somebody trying to invade Moria. If we're going to take liberties, fucking take liberties. But I want to see them with like huge shields and great big spears behind it, blocking up tunnels and just like butchering orcs and stuff. That'd be cool.
Like an attempted siege, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm very impressed with Khazad-dûm. I hope we get to see their interpretation of the Dwarfs and the Chamber of Marzabul as well, because you're only seeing a little bit so far. They've got 4 more series to. I hope if they wake up the Balrog at the end of this series, I'll be really pissed off.
Yeah, they some things they need to sort of long out a bit.
Yeah, because they've already shown the Balrog.
Yeah, so he's got to be in this series, or unless it's some sort of flashback. I don't know. That's that could probably take us on to the next point of where we'd like to see this go over this series and over the course of 5 series. I was thinking as I was watching part 2 that I'd love it to end on the Battle of the Last Alliance, where Sauron's defeated, basically, well, half defeated, and it ends there. We go up to that point, and then obviously you go into the like towards the Third Age, Lord of the Rings and stuff. That's where I want to see the series go and end.
Yeah, I think that's probably a given, to be honest. I say my biggest concern is that it's with the compression of the timeline, because that really, to me, sells short the idea that the whole reason Numenor sort of is seduced by Sauron is because of their mortality. And if you're sort of compressing the timeline, it's, I don't know, they're envious of elves' immortality, and it just sort of, by not compressing the timeline, you could easily introduce new characters each episode for Numenor if it needed to do.
Well, they said they didn't want to do that.
Yeah,
that's why they've messed around with the time. I was like, well, I'm on the other side of that. I was like, well, no, fucking do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, it's like I could talk about this a little bit with House of the Dragon. It's just sort of they're skipping time quite happily. I just felt that it's skipping time a bit too much. Whereas,
rushing it a bit.
Yeah, whereas with sort of the Second Age, I think it's just critical not to. Maybe they'll do it well anyway, so that the compression of the timeline doesn't matter, and we understand, and they present it to, I don't know, the casual viewer that mortality plays heavily on the line of Numenor. We'll see. Again, as I said earlier, and I've said before, it's how they depict Numenor is probably going to be the make or break thing for me for this show, mainly because as much as I love elves, I love sort of the Edain, the Dunedain, the Numenorians.
There's so much they can do with that, because there's so much history, during and post Numenor, that they can make more series with if they've got the rights.
Yeah.
If you want a proper Game of Thrones, then you give the story of Arnor.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many good things that they can cover, which, I don't know, if Rings of Power is as successful as they want it to be, you would think that they would maybe consider what else they can explore.
Yeah, there'll be spin-off series and everything.
It doesn't cost them 250 million just for a 5 series.
Yeah.
5 chapter episode series. They'll definitely expand more.
So where would you like to see this series go, Jack?
I want the Harfots to discover pipeweed.
Goals.
I don't know, because to be honest, I never.
You just letting it flow.
This isn't the age I'd have made the Second Age into an entire TV series. I would have. I don't know. I'd have tried my hardest to buy the rights to the Silmarillion, and I'd have done the Children of Húrin, then I've done the Fall of Gondolin, and I've done the Lay of Lúthien and Beren. I don't know if I'd have done an entire age into a series with nothing to go on. So I don't know where I want them to go. I also know where it's going. So it's a bit sort of, it's anticlimactic for me in a way. I'm not bothered by spoilers, so I want to know who Sauron is now. I don't ever give a shit about spoilers. I hate that sort of trying to figure out who someone is. I want to watch him doing it and being like, "You weaselly little bastard! I know what's coming, but you'll get yours in the end." You know.
Sauron the Deceiver.
It's got to be Meteor Man, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's some pictures of some dodgy-looking characters.
The M&M guy.
No, it's not a guy; it's a girl, and she's a high priestess of the cult of Morgoth.
All right.
Right. No, I was going to say it's like maybe they're some sort of cultists on Numenor that obviously when Sauron gets there, it gives him sort of an extra sort of avenue to spread the corruption.
Well, that's what happens, isn't it? The Numenorians break into two factions. There's the faithful, and then there's and they're the old ways, and they still hold communication with the elves. And then there's the cultists that literally worship Morgoth, and they create a massive temple to Morgoth. And then they rise up to go and invade Valinor to try and claim immortality from the gods. So you will see all of that.
Yeah.
And then you have 9 ships flee Numenor to go and found, because the Numenorians at this point are starting to colonize the coastline.
Yeah.
They have ships in where they have settlements in Umbar, and they have settlements in what is Gondor. But then Elendil and his sons come, and they actually found the kingdom of Arnor and the kingdom of Gondor. But they've only cast Isildur; they haven't cast Anorian yet.
Yeah, so done Isildur, haven't they?
Yeah, but I hope they don't miss out Arnorian as well, because they're missing Celeborn, Círdan, and Arnorian so far that I'm looking at, and Narvi. So there's 4 characters there that we know of in the Second Age that aren't there.
Yeah. They might bring them in eventually because we've got a lot of characters introduced already.
They fucking better.
Yeah.
Me and Bezos are going to have words.
Right. On that note, I think we've pretty much covered the first 2 episodes and much more. Yeah, we'll get together for the 3rd one and then some. I've really enjoyed this though. It's been a really good chat.
Yeah.
What would you rate the 2 episodes? We wrote them both together. At the moment, I'm on a 6 out of 10. If it weren't for the landscape and the setting, I'd be down at a 4 probably, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm 6 out of 10 overall. I think probably 9 out of 10 for all the scenery and stuff, but the storyline is 4 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, very slow, and we'll see where it goes. But it's only 2 episodes. What about you, Trev?
Well, I have already publicly stated 7 out of 10, and I'm going to stick with that, even though I've got a few more gripes than I had after initially watching it.
Yeah,
I have high hopes for it, and I say I'm going to hold to the 7 out of 10, mainly because you reach a certain point where you watch, say, a pilot episode or a first couple of episodes to any series, and they always do the same thing, which is they introduce the characters, they lay groundwork, and it's a formula. So there are
quite a few good points, and like we said, it's Middle Earth. We're seeing Middle Earth again.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good positive note to end it. And
we'll do
thanks
this again next week.
Definitely. Thanks for anyone watching and listening, and hopefully we can get on it next week and enjoy the rest of your week.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.